Magic mirror in my hand, who are the fairest listeners in the land? Oh, hi, you. I'm your host, Snow, and this is Snow's Scary Adventures. So, if you're into the spooky, the macabre, or just plain mysterious, join me here every Tuesday. In this story, I'm going to be speaking to a new friend of mine. He goes by the name of Andrew Hernandez, and his experience at the Ogden Union Station in Utah. Now, this is the first time I've ever heard about this place, and it is extremely compelling with how much history this site has. On with the show. Hi, Andrew. It's nice to meet you. I know that we've been kind of chit chatting back and forth through a paranormal group that we both found on Facebook. So
Yep.
I'm glad to have found you. Um, I know very little about this story. I just know that this is when you were doing IT work at the Ogden Union Station and you had some experiences there. Is that correct?
That is correct. This was circa 2004, 2005.
Mhm.
I had a friend who was an events coordinator there for the museum portion of the Ogden Union Station. She had several servers that she needed to get on sync together and whatnot, and she wanted to upgrade a couple of other things so far as her access router and whatnot. I know I'm talking techie right now, but the long story short.
Oh, good. I'm sure most of my audience will figure that out.
Yeah. So the long story short, as I was saying, is I was just trying to get everything all put together, and my last step was just to make sure that their main server that everyone was tied to was talking to all the computers. The server is kept in the basement area of the train station that's there. So obviously, right off the bat, there's already this.
Yeah, nothing ever starts good in a basement.
Exactly. And I had to meet like the then owner and the general manager on top of her, and then we talked for a few minutes. They let me know where the server was. They showed me the grand tour. Now there's a few other things in that station. There's a few hallways that you have to go through that also were infamous for some things that went on, and I'll get to those shortly. But the main story begins when I was there my first night, and I went down to the basement to start the server work. The owner and the general manager were guiding me down. They kind of showed me that there's some vaults there, and they said, "This is where you need to go." I went ahead and turned on the main light there. It shone right into the server room, as they called it, and I was beginning my work. Now, the one thing that I did notice as I was going down, I was a little uncomfortable about it, and it felt like I was walking through a spider web. And I asked out directly,
Oh.
"Hey," I says, "this place is haunted, isn't it?" And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because I just got this weird vibe. I said, just wondering if it is." I says, "No biggie. I'm not a scared of ghosts or anything like that. I just want to know." Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it is. It was almost like they were ashamed to admit it.
Well, I mean, I can understand why, because they're scared of losing work, you know? Like,
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing that I know that the event coordinator let them know is that that kind of stuff fascinated me to begin with. So I probably wouldn't be that person go running out screaming and tearing my
mhm.
hair out or whatnot. So I was pretty happy about that. But when I went down there, the next thing I know, I'm doing my work, and the owner, he says, "Hey, I'm gonna go upstairs. I'll be right back." And I said, certainly." He made allusion to going to the restroom, and that's the important part because I heard him go up the stairs,
Oh,
open the
God.
door, close it, and that was it. So I'm doing my work, and it couldn't have been a minute because I remember it was like 7:35 on the clock on the lower right hand corner. It turns 7:36. The door opens again, and I hear someone stomping down the stairs.
Oh, God.
And I said, "Oh my God." I says, "That was fast. Did you even wash your hands?"
Ew, yeah.
I was joking, of course, but I wanted to go ahead and throw that out there and just maybe I normally you garner a laugh from something like that. And I didn't hear anything. And so the steps continue to the bottom because there's like about maybe 20 steps to come down to this to the floor there, the basement, and it's still just outside the door. I don't even know who's coming down yet. And as soon as the steps stop, the light that's outside turns off. Now, when that turns off, it turns off the light that's right there in the server room. So the only thing I've got now is the computer, the light coming from the screen,
Mhm.
and there's nothing else. So of course I calmly reach up and I pull this string that turns on a light that's just above me, and I says, "Hey," I says, "did you need to save energy? If you want, I can just use this light above me." Now there's still silence.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm just hallucinating. So I continue my work. About 5 minutes later, I hear the door open again. Someone comes down the stairs, and now the owner pops his head through the door and he says, "Why did you turn the light off?" I says, "I didn't." I says, "I thought you had come down here earlier and you turned the light off yourself."
Oh.
He says, "Oh," you know, that that ashamed kind of oh that you get from
Oh.
someone something went on.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, it's okay. I mean, I at that point I realized, oh, I just had an encounter. You know, that was pretty interesting. I wish I had gotten some EVP. I had gotten a tape recorder or something. I wasn't thinking that way, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, there have been a lot of times where I go into business like places and I can tell something's like either residual or something just kind of hanging about. And I'm like,
Mm,
oh, why don't I have my dowsing rods? Or why don't I have my, like those
exactly.
little things here or there? Because you're like, oh, I could have picked up something. This is definitely something going on here. Oh, that's
Well,
funny.
from there, I mean, it was just a matter of just getting everything finished, and then I got everything saved, everything, made sure it was there. I had him go up there, and they had one of those little intercoms right there.
Uh-huh.
So he went upstairs and he went to go make sure that the computers all saw each other and they were able to print off of the same server and what have you. That took about like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes and what have you. And then he's gone.
Mhm.
So then I packed up my stuff. I, powered down the monitor and everything, what have you.
Mhm.
And I make plans to do the rest of the work, which includes, a couple of new cables. I'm running stuff here and there, and I'm also putting in a router for them and programming that for. They were starting to do some of that wireless stuff. This is when that was 802.11a,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the
yeah.
crazy
Yeah,
stuff we've got now.
yeah. Yeah, that's when they're barely starting to get everything on wireless and things along those lines on the network. That's okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and needless to say, I had to go upstairs to their main ballroom area, and that's where they have all their banquets, and they've got a little kitchenette there and what have you. And I was kind of doing some work there.
Mhm.
And on the way in to that ballroom, I see this lady, but you can tell that she wasn't right because she looked like she was literally floating above the floor. She's
Oh,
got this Victorian gown stuff on and kind of one of those old 19th century type hats or like whatever,
yeah,
like
yeah,
someone who's
yeah.
outside.
Hmm.
I'm just like, wow, okay. And I said, "Hey, who are you?" And before I knew it, it was like she was moving really fast and she went around a corner somewhere. And before I could get to that point, I'm like, "Hey, hey, who are you?" She's gone. And I'm like, "Okay, well, there you go. That's just not right." Um, let's continue down to the ballroom area. And I made mention of the lady, and they said, "Oh yeah." They said, that lady, she's been there and she's not quite right, but they say that when they redid the whole place, that the hall that you were on was a little bit higher. So she's just
Oh,
going,
so that explains why her height is up. Oh,
yeah,
that's trippy.
yeah. And the events coordinator let me know. She says, "Yeah, so you know," she says, "there's a few things that go on around here." She says, "I know that you found out that it's haunted. I know I meant to tell you. And I
Yeah,
heard
right.
you
They
had an
meant to tell you.
experience." So I'm like, "Well, it doesn't matter." I says, like, next time," I says, "I'll just bring my recording equipment." She says, "Oh yeah, come on down. I'll let you into the Ford Theater area, and if you want, you can hang out there and whatnot. We're going to have an investigation here in 2 weeks. If you want to be part of it, I'll even make the
Oh.
arrangements." And I was literally jumping out of my skin saying, "Yeah, send me there, sign me up, you know." So the next thing I know, I get all my stuff done that I need to, and I finish it up. And I keep hearing this rattling from the kitchen area. So I went ahead and looked over there. Don't hear anyone. And I says, "Hey," I says, "I'm gonna be closing shop here." I says, "Don't think anyone wants any visitors, so do me a favor and just kind of see yourself out because I can't see you out." And I was doing it as a joke. And the next thing I know, all the dishes that were there fall down onto the floor.
Oh my God.
I'm like, "Okay, well, I didn't ask you to do anything. I just asked you to, you know."
It's like, excuse me, what do you mean let me out?
So no doubt, I was kind of like surprised. Now, mind you, I was a little startled from the for all the dishes and everything like that, but it's still, I mean, it was like, okay, I'm expecting things to happen, but I wasn't expecting that kind of activity.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and got everything all finished up. And then I went downstairs to they have like a Winchester museum or Browning museum or something. Where they have all these old rifles from like the 19th century.
Nice. Okay.
And so I went in there just to make sure certain things were set. And the guard that was with me said, "Hey, I heard a whole bunch of noise upstairs. Everything all right?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's just me." And I told him, I says, "I just knocked down some dishes where I was running some cable because I didn't want to get into it." And
Yeah.
the guard happens to tell me, he says, he says, "Just so you know," he says, "things happen around here that are unexplained." He says, "So if you do run into things and you just can't explain it," he says, "you don't have to give one or cover for anyone here. We all know." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay."
Well, in that
So,
case, yes.
oh, and so I told him what everything that had taken place already, and he says, "Oh," he says, "in that case," he says, "you're getting the," what do you say? "I'm getting the royal treatment." I said, "What do you mean the royal treatment?" He says, "Well," he says, "when they really like you," he says, "or they don't like you," he says, "and they start to do things."
Ooh.
I'm like, "Well, they haven't done anything to me directly." And he says, "No," he says, "more than likely," he says, "if they're going to do anything to you, they would have already." He says, "but if they're just entertaining you, which it sounds like they are," he says, "then welcome to the club." He says, "You've pretty much been given the welcome, if you will."
Initiation.
Yep. So I'm like, "Hey, that's great." So I finished everything without any more incidents, but later I came back and I did some recordings, and I did get some EVP. I didn't actually get any recordings here today because that particular USB, which is right here, this is the one that holds all my recordings, and it's deciding not to function. So I'm thinking there's a format error or something.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, but I do have one, but that one was the one I was practicing beforehand, and I picked up some EVP that took place in the background while I was just kind of going over my script. Was it the whole ghost investigation thing that they were doing there?
Mhm.
Um, I went into the Ford Theater where they were meeting. They were all talking. The lights were turned off. You kind of knew because they all had flashlights or what have you. And I started talking to somebody that was right there. They just asked me, they say, "Hey," "how do you feel about this whole thing?" And I says, "Well," I says, "considering," I says, "it's been a long time since I've been on an investigation." I said, "This is going to be great. I am totally looking forward to it."
Oh,
And he
wow.
says, "Oh, that's me too." He says, "And I always enjoy people coming out here to visit." He says, I just wish that, for whatever reason, he says, I could just have a longer conversation. I said, well, I'm here now. Come talk to me.
Mhm.
Well, at that moment, the lights went on
Oh
and I
God.
was in the middle and there was nobody there. Real story. They were all wondering
Oh
who I
my
was talking
God.
to because they were on the stage. They weren't even in the middle of the floor where I was at, and they were wondering who I was talking to. So when I told them the story, they were all freaked out and like, "Oh my God, I didn't even have anything on."
Did you get did you get an idea of who the spirit may have been?
Well, the Ford Theater at one time was also a morgue, and it was the place where they actually kept a lot of the bodies that were transported
What?
during World War II. And so what would happen is if there was a loved one whose origins was from like the Ogden, Weber County area,
Mhm.
from Salt Lake or what have you, a lot of the bodies would come transported on train, and then they would take them off and they would put them there in that theater area because it was out of the light. It was a little bit cooler than the rest. They kept
Mhm.
everything in bags, and they stacked them. It was like 3 or 4 deep,
Oh wow.
and so you had folks that were there. So I probably should have caught the clue when he said, "I wish people would come and visit me more often." I didn't
Yeah.
think about it that way. I was
Yeah, I
just
wouldn't have
thinking,
thought about it either. Um maybe just like another coordinator or something. I wish more people would come and like visit this and like do this with us. Like because that's something you could easily like pass off as just regular like banter when you're
conversation
and
exactly.
yeah when you're especially when you're investigating. Jeez.
Yeah.
So it must have been just somebody who was there. That's crazy. But then it makes you wonder like how many well, it actually makes more sense than how many are there, are wandering and like trying to grab attention.
From what I understand, quite a few. The guards would always talk about that when they have to lock up at night at about like midnight or so, they have to make sure the doors are all shut. And it's not uncommon when they do the back end of the theater there, the doors would pop open for no reason and
Oh
the
my
alarms would go
gosh.
off. So they have to go back in and they have to make sure that they reset the alarms, get everything shut again. It happens 2 or 3 times. The dressing rooms that are behind there are infamous. There's a couple of gals that apparently like to poke their head in, if you will, and will visit with the people that are there whenever they have any kind of production. There was one lady who had filed a complaint with the house manager because there was a man in the restroom for the women's uh, laboratory, and he kind of chuckled to himself because they've had complaints of someone with men's boots that would walk into the bathroom and supposedly go in and use one of the stalls,
uh
and this was a constant occurrence.
oh, that's
So,
creepy.
oh yeah, yeah, and it there were so many stories like this that after a while, some of the people that they just kind of like, yeah, whatever.
That's a lot.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like I'm gonna have to like do some more research on Ogden. So this is interesting. I mean, it's already a hot spot for other reasons aside from the fact that it was used for the bodies. But just in general, I mean, you said you're out by Salt Lake City, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, because you guys have like a lot of activity just in general as like a place, right? Because of the Salt Lakes, like you guys have like conduit.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's a short way of putting it. The hot spots that I know of are basically like what they call the Sugar House area, which is like on the eastern side of the Salt Lake Valley. Ogden is another hot spot. The city of Layton, which is in between, does have a lot of areas of activity. There are places out towards Tooele County. Asylum 49, I think, is out there, and so
Oh,
is
creepy.
the there's a mill out there that I think is the something Grand West Mill or something like that that's out there as well. Those areas are, well, for lack of a way of putting it, and if I'm allowed to say so, they're haunted as hell. So if you get a chance
That's fun.
to be out there, they're worth it. There's a lot of the places that some of the folks I've talked to in the past who have tendered their stories to me about the things that they managed to get. There was an old funeral parlor in Sugar House that was converted into an apartment. And one of my friends had rented a room there with a couple of her roommates. And it was all one floor on the top area. And then the bottom area was like this communal living room kind of area and kitchen.
Uh-huh.
And so they always had issues of things, doors opening for no reason. The front door would get opened at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I would
You
not
know,
be
they,
happy with that. No, thank you.
no, they
At
complained
least it was
all
2
the
a.m.
time.
and not 3 a.m.
Oh, yeah. What
Just
can you do?
saying. Um, well, I mean, another thing is like you said, the Ogden Union Station is also a theater.
Yeah, they have
A
a
lot of
theater there.
productions and stuff there. Just because that in itself, I mean, if I mean, I don't know if you did theater before. I'm assuming
Mhm.
you dabbled. Yeah. um, we already know we leave on the ghost lights for specific reasons. We do believe that there are those that are attached to the spaces and to the theater um because of what we do on stage. What we're doing is we're helping people connect, and a lot of times that can create more intense energy, and in other ways can create a residual energy. So um that in itself is already inviting because
Oh,
it is a theater. Yeah. So we make it very clear as thespians that everyone is welcome in the theater, including our spirits. So um that makes it funny too. The fact that you were speaking to somebody like in the audience, like, oh dear.
oh yeah.
And it,
Eh, eh,
what was your initial feeling after you realized that that wasn't anybody actually there? Did you get like a heart skip a beat? Did you feel a little sweaty? What happened?
well, you know that chill you get, like your hair stands on end all
Yeah, yeah,
over or whatever. It was that kind of a feeling. Like it was. I was surprised. I felt like I had just been punked, if you will.
yeah.
But I had that hair on end kind of thing. Oh my God, you know, I talked to Casper. He didn't want to play.
And then a full conversation. That was a pretty good conversation. That wasn't just like one word or two.
No, yeah, it was a full conversation. I wasn't expecting anything more than you know, that I was talking to a real person because there
Yeah,
was a whole group of people coming in. They were all in the main area, and I like to call myself that guy that gets distracted by little, shiny things and what have you. So that also means that if someone talks to me,
I
I'm
understand
gonna
that.
tune everybody out. I'm gonna focus on you.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to, what you have to say. I'm going to listen. And this person, he happened to hit me the right way, if you will, because I was talking to him. I didn't even pay attention to the crowd going up to the main stage area. And as I was talking, we had this conversation. And then, after, he made his comment and the lights went on, there's no one there.
Oh.
And and I turned to the rest of them and I'm like, "What happened?" And they said my look was, enough for them. They realized at that point that I was not only surprised, but I was like, they said it looked like I was expecting to see someone right there. My body language, as I was,
Yeah.
what's going on here? I talk with my hands a lot, so obviously they were out and I'm just having these conversations, and then who are you talking to? Well, I was talking to this guy right here in front of me. Obviously not. And I says, trust me, I haven't been drinking. And they're like, no, no,
I wonder if
no.
anybody else has had as intense an experience as you. That's a big one. I don't think I've had only dreams where I'm speaking to an entity. But I've never like in person felt like I was speaking to an entity. So that's that's very rare. Like to think you see a full apparition in front of you and you're just kind of having the
Well, I didn't see him. That's the problem. I only
You just knew he
heard.
was there or
Yeah, and
there. Yeah.
you like if you're in the dark with someone and you can't see them, but you know they're standing in front of you. It's that
Yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
a
Yeah.
acknowledgement. So I can't say that I really saw him per se. I mean, I did have that conversation. It felt like there was someone standing there. It felt like I'm having this conversation with you virtually.
Yeah.
The same kind of feeling. I can acknowledge that there was someone there, and it just blew me away when the light came on. There was nothing.
Jeez.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Have you gone back since?
I've gone back several times. Not just for work, but just, to be there. What they used to have a tour called Night at the Museum. The city of Ogden had shut it down because I guess it was evoking the wrong connotation for the kind of place they wanted to have. And I'm like, oh,
Okay.
come on.
I get it. I get it. They didn't want too much spooky going on if they wanted to use it as other events. But come on.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is what
And
it is.
they have catacombs underneath the city, and it's infamous to have them there. I know they have the catacombs in Salt Lake City as well and whatnot, and they're not completely urban legend. I've seen a couple of them.
Oh, wow.
Um, they used to be used during the Prohibition, and then later, I know some of those catacombs in the Salt Lake Valley area were used for some of the polygamous families,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
not
Okay.
completely sure about how that worked because the folks that are more or less the guardians of those catacombs are pretty tight lipped. And I'm obviously not LDS, which means I'm not going to know
I'm not gonna
all the ins
know
and
what
outs.
happened. Yeah. Yeah, you're not gonna have access to any of that information unless you were, and even then you can't really just
uh,
gain access anymore. It's very different.
no, yeah,
Yeah,
they keep
no.
it pretty tight
That's
lipped.
pretty quiet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez, Andrew, that was a fun story. I don't think I've dealt with anybody who's dealt with a full on conversation quite yet. Not intelligent, you know?
I brought my daughter to the Ogden station. This is a couple years later.
Oh wow.
And this was just before the events coordinator I knew that she was going to retire.
Uh-huh.
And so it was myself, my daughter, and then she wanted to bring a friend. And so we went, and on this one area that it's like a catwalk that goes just above where the main lobby area is. When you first go into the Union Station, obviously this huge cement block kind of place has got all kinds of colors and paintings and what have you, but it leads into where the train station would have stopped. People would have gone on there, what have you. And above it, there's this walk area that was where the conductors and all the train employees would go up and they would enjoy their lunch. They were away from everybody, and they would, whatever, hobnob with themselves and
Uh-huh.
what have you, and then go back to the station and then board the trains and go on to do their job. And this long hallway um, was one that they have redone quite a few times, but there was, in fact, a story I heard from one of the guards beforehand that there was a little girl
Uh,
that would run up and down the hall, and that she had a brother that would play with her from time to time, and people would talk about the idea that they would hear them up there running up and down, playing and what have you. I don't know what the story was behind it, and this leads to my whole adventure with my daughter and her friend. So we went up there, and I actually had gotten my phone. I had one of those iPhone 4s or whatnot at the time,
uh,
and we're taking pictures of everything. And on my daughter's phone, she took a picture of myself where I was like looking out the window and her friend was just beyond. And in between the two of us, there was that girl in like her purple gown or whatever. And she was kind of like halfway between me and the open. So it's like you can
oh my
tell that there was
gosh.
an overlay, but it was a digital camera. So how did you get that to happen?
Yeah.
And we didn't realize what we had captured until we had gone to lunch and we were going through all of our pictures and whatnot together. Um, I know she still has it. That's like her trophy prize, if you will. And I'm hoping to post that here because I told her I wanted to get that, for one of the things that we're going to do later. And she said, "Oh yeah, great, I'll do that." But
Oh yeah, that'd be
um,
awesome. That
yeah,
would be
I'll have it
awesome to be
posted
able to
later.
see it. That'd be so cool. How did you feel? How did she feel when she first realized that you had captured that? Like what was the thought?
Well, they both kind of was like, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Like yeah. I would
And
say like that's the scariest thing.
oh yeah, and it wasn't even expected. To be honest with you, I didn't know we were going to get anything because anyone who's ever been on a kind of paranormal investigation, they're going to tell you that about 90% of the time you're probably going to get skunked, just like fishing,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yep. Yep. It's very rare that you get any kind of anything. Um wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing all of those with me. It looks
yeah,
like Ogden is a hot spot, and if I ever get the chance, I'll have to get out there.
yeah, come on down anytime. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of folks out here would love to share their stories. And I'm quite certain that someone will probably know about it there, or they have a friend of a friend of a friend. I'm sure that can.
Yeah, somebody who has some kind of testimony, but that's how we are here where I live. Out here in El Paso, Texas, we're really old, really old little establishment here. Before it was considered a city, it was still a um established or like founded in the what like 1592 or something like that. So we're an old, very old, a lot of boots stomped through here, for a very long time before there was any established city. um so yeah, we have a lot of weird stories, and if you don't know some if you haven't had an experience, you're going to know somebody who has. And
Mhm.
this whole city is full of you've got about 25% of us are skeptics, and then the rest are full on believers. There's stuff. And it's very hard for us. Like once you have those conversations with the skeptics, it's like, okay, like, you kind of like, oh, well, you just haven't experienced something yet. And then sure enough, like, like you hear the story later, they're no longer skeptic. Yeah, there's
Oh
something
yeah.
there.
I
um,
totally buy that. Let me ask you a question because I know that El Paso is just north of Juarez,
yeah.
and there is a road that leads out of Juarez itself that leads into an area they call to El Zono del Silencio, which I want to get more information on that one because I want to know if it's true that there are like creatures out there.
So, that's the first time that I've heard of this. And the only
Really?
reason yeah, it probably is because they try to keep it quiet so that you're not scared of stuff. But I do know that there are different parts of town where people have seen kind of halflings.
I've heard about that. That's
Um, even including my aunt. My aunt has seen a part dog, part human, and it was. And but when I say like dog, I don't mean like look like werewolf kind of thing. It looked like a part like almost bulldog and human, kind of running down the street. Um, and there is, the story of the dog man around here too. So
yeah.
um she saw it like in the middle of the night, after leaving her friend's house. Her kids asleep in the back seat, kind of a thing, and she just saw this thing kind of like on all fours, kind of running down the street. And she was like, "Oh God, what the hell's that?"
Oh my.
So I do believe that just us in general, as far as like what I said with it being like um so old. So, there's so many stories here. I mean, we had our own tribes here. The Tigua is the major tribe around here. Um but because of them, I feel like we don't know what has been a part of this area before we were ever established here, before any Spaniards came in, anything
Mhm.
came in, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We don't know how long it really has been occupied. I'm not sure if you would consider us like a hotspot or like a portal or anything along those lines, but I do know that we do have a lot of things that have happened again that are unexplained. And I get so thrown off. I'm like, where are all the ghost hunters that you know, you guys need to come out here. The only people that have been out here have been ghost adventurers, and they came to the DeSoto Hotel.
Yeah.
And I think you probably have seen, if you've seen it, then you know very much that there was a very strong presence there,
Mhm.
very evil. And I'm just surprised that not more people have come out to try to do investigations. But I do hope to plan an investigation at a mission soon, including a jail cell that once held Billy the Kid. It is very creepy. So I'm looking forward to being able to try it out. I know as soon as you walk near those grounds, you can feel the weight. Um, so yeah, that's just an idea of that. There are so many other spots here in El Paso. Everybody has that kind of energy here, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
when you say like, oh, I feel something, it's like everybody has had again that kind of experience. There's that 25% the skeptic, but even then they have stories. So it's just interesting. This whole area has its own energy that's hard to explain. But yeah, I'm glad to have found another fellow investigator. Again, we can find you, you said, at Friday Night Dark.
Mhm. I do know that if you just put in Nitrax, Nitracks, that's how I have it spelled out.
Okay.
But you just type that in there, it should pop up. My website at least will, and then my website has everything that's there. I'll go ahead and if you want, I can send you over the link to that
Yeah,
so that
sounds great. So
uh,
that we can go ahead and put that in the channel description here too. But it was great
yeah,
speaking to you, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here.
it's been my pleasure.
It's been great, and you have a good rest of your afternoon and other interview here.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it, and thanks once again, and you have a wonderful night yourself. Okay,
Thanks. Bye.
bye bye.
After speaking with Andrew, I actually did some research on Ogden and the Ogden Union Station. And I was so thrown off by how much I could find. Um, what I do know, based off of somebody else's research and one of their own blogs about the history and the deaths that have happened just at the station, actual deaths, not found bodies or things along those lines. There has been over 41 recorded deaths. Um, that in itself should tell you that there is a crazy amount of energy at Ogden Union Station. If I ever have the chance to get out there, I will definitely want to do one of those ghost hunts, and hopefully Andrew will join me. This episode was produced and hosted by me, Snow, and special thanks to Andrew for joining me today and for Master Sword Music for all the music in my episodes. If you want to catch me live, you can catch me at Twitch, touch_of_snow, SNO, or you can just follow my links that will be in the channel's description. And remember, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the strongest fear is the fear of the unknown.